I would like to highlight recent advances that I see with businesses providing consumer-grade facial recognition software, where you can upload someone's face and you can find websites that relate to them. I want to go over what this means, what its limitations are, and potential trouble spots. Really what this means, in the briefest summary I can provide, is the things you are putting on the internet, whether with your permission and knowledge or indirect sources, are being used and aggregated on levels we have not seen up until now. And so I will show you with such tools such as PimEyes, which is the largest database in Europe, how things you may find about yourself online are easily aggregated and brought to the forefront with a single photo. Let's begin. This is the present and future of interacting with the global datasphere. What do I mean by the global datasphere? It's all the information that we've collected as a human civilization around the world. And there's quite a bit of data out there. So it's estimated about 100 zettabytes, and this may mean nothing to most people, which is fine, but there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of data out there. We have perhaps billions of web pages, a considerable amount of media and content, considerable amount of databases, purchase history, and the like. We are now getting a revolution in the Internet of Things, where we have increased sensors all around, whether it's temperature gauges or highway cameras or doorbells with cameras and audio. We have sort of gunshot detection in major cities, and we are seeing an increase in technology in our intimate lives with new devices such as Alexa and more devices inside of our homes, which don't always have a cut and dry scope on what they are recording. And with this vast amount of data, usually we rely on tools to view what we find important to us. Because of the mound of data that's out there, no human being could adequately search through it. There's just too much. And so we use tools to help us go through it, to aggregate it, and to provide the information that we want. And I'm going to show how there are many tools, and we commonly use these tools such as search engines, and there will be ever-increasing tools which allow us to sift through this massive amount of data that we've collected and generated throughout time. So before we can get into that, I have to define a few things. These are by no means the formal definitions, but it'll do for now. So I'm calling data aggregation services basically software or technology which allows users of that technology to sift through a bunch of data, a bunch of information. So rather than having to go and check out each web page for certain information, we have search engines that do that for us, provide a rank. This is such as Google or Bing. And now we have facial recognition software, which we'll get into with the PimEyes. And we'll have ever-increasing data aggregation services coming out as we create more and more data. Then we have crawler and scraper. These are basically programs which go out on the internet and either index or collect data on what's out there from the web pages. So the crawler usually checks out a bunch of different websites, indexes it, reports back, and then the scraper is usually used to collect the data from those pages. We have robots.txt, which basically defines whether or not a crawler or scraper is allowed on certain pages, certain directories of a website, and whether the scraper can collect data from that page itself. All right, so our current tools, which we're familiar with, search engines, you provide a text, a query to the search engine, you hit enter, and it shows relevant web pages. Nothing new here, pretty standard. We also have Google Reverse Image, where it provides image similarity match. You provide an image to it, and it will try to find similar images. Perhaps it's the background. Perhaps it's a certain geolocation, like a temple or some tourist attraction, and it'll provide similar images based on the image you provided. But this is at the pixel level rather than a feature-based level based on what's actually in the image. So if you used this Google Reverse Image on a photo of someone, it's not going to return, at least in its current state, it's not going to return photos of that person. It may return photos of people with similar characteristics, like similar hair color or a similar background, etc. This is pixel-based. It's not feature-based, features from the image themselves. But now we have consumer-level tools which do allow, in some sense, feature derivatives from images, in particular facial recognition software, which will try to find faces from the websites that are similar to an input prompt, an input image. So you provide an image of someone with their face. PimEyes is going to return URLs where it found similar looking faces. They do this with a neural hash, and PimEyes returns, like I said, the web pages of people with similar faces. And so PimEyes defines the scope of the open web, sites that allow crawling, which is the robots.txt, but it does not include social media, although there are services such as Clearview AI, which does crawl social media accounts. But here PimEyes does not, and they don't include private accounts or sites requiring registered users. And like I said before, they're the biggest database in Europe, but they don't store images. They index the URLs and they sort of in real time load the images, but this is a technical point that's not needed for right now. So I tested it out. I wanted to see how well this service could do. And I have an acquaintance who did amateur adult films. She was in 2 or 3 adult films. And I applied her image from a Facebook image, which was much different from what she looked like in the film. She had a different hair color and she had a different plumpness in her face, we'll say. She had gained a little weight since doing her adult films. So sort of a different look, and I was wondering, with just an image, could I find the adult videos that she did? Because PimEyes has crawled adult film websites and has indexed them, because one of the features that PimEyes is advertising is the ability to find revenge porn. So for people who don't know, revenge porn is perhaps you sent pictures of yourself to a significant other and they're revealing and what have you, and then that person posts them online without your consent, which is a crime. And so PimEyes is saying, we've scraped these adult porn sites, adult film sites, and we have applied our facial recognition to the videos, and we'll be able to find if your face is discovered or similar looking faces are discovered on these websites. And so to my surprise, it was able to find her videos. And not only that, it was able to provide different frames from the same video which matched her face, which shows that they're applying the facial recognition on a frame by frame basis. which is quite incredible. If you've ever worked with image processing, it requires a bunch of compute to do a frame by frame analysis, even if it's not every frame they're applying it to, because that gets really compute heavy, as some video cameras can range from 24 frames per second to 300 frames per second. And it, again, requires a considerable amount of compute to run through each of these images. But nonetheless, it found her videos. So out of all the adult films out there, it was able to locate her from an image on her Facebook page, and it was able to find her adult films. And then I tried to say, well, can I just Google reverse image to find, these videos? And of course I couldn't, because that's not what Google's reverse image does, right? That's a pixel level basis. This is a neural hash of your face basis, so it's going to try to find similar looking faces. So you may say, you don't have to worry about that, right? You don't have any adult films out there. So then I tried someone I went to high school with. Again, I pulled an image from their social media, which was public, and there was no indication that she worked in the explicit art / photos realm, that she sort of did softcore porn. And I took an image, gave it to PimEyes once more, and said, show me what you got. And from that, I discovered that she, in fact, does adult images, and could find her OnlyFans, Instagram, her Suicide Girls account, and other such accounts which were not linked to her on her personal account, on her personal social media. So that was quite alarming, that basically you could provide someone's image, whether it's their OnlyFans, and you could find information about them and other media websites with their image on it. So then I did this for another one of my friends who's a model. She's at an agency, and with this, provided her image to PimEyes, and it aggregated basically all of her photo shoots that were online. It was quite surprising that there were so many actual, images of her modeling for swimsuits and clothing and shoes and what have you. And it sort of aggregated all of these different websites who used her image for a brand or clothing of some kind. Then I went on Tinder, and I thought, let's try to find some photos, and let's see what we can learn about people from just a Tinder photo and their bios that they provide. And there were a few cases that really stood out to me that I think highlights the power of this technology, while also being concerning, at least in my mind. So from images just on Tinder, I was able to find that there was a local business owner who received a grant for her business, and it linked right to the article describing why she got this grant and how they wanted other people to apply for this grant and so forth. And basically was able to see, from a Tinder photo what her business was, where her business was located, and then other information about her, basically her full name, her occupation, and so forth. There was another example where I could find from someone's Tinder photo, it linked to their graduation photos from the college that she attended. PimEyes is scraping college websites of colleges posting graduation photos of their graduation of their grads. Another example was OnlyFans account, which was fairly common on Tinder. So from images, was able to link back to their OnlyFans accounts. There were other examples where you could find previous employers. So the example was there was a stylist for a salon, And from her photo, it brought back to, I believe, her previous employer, and she was in a picture of Meet Our Team. And then if you went back to that website, you saw that she was no longer working there. So you could basically triangulate past work history from something as simple as Meet Our Team page, where these are sort of fairly common nowadays. It says, what the people do and maybe a brief description for a company. There was another user who I found her, from her Tinder photo, was able to find a post from roomies.com, which is looking for a place to stay / roommates. And so from a single image, I was able to find out where she was trying to stay, where was she trying to find a roommate, and, the description of what sort of things she liked and so forth. What was her budget for the month and what kind of roommate she was looking for. Then another example, I was able to find profiles from music concerts. So these were photos that were taken by the venue, it seemed, who was hosting the music festival. So these are usually photos of just people in the crowd. And from the myriad of pictures of people enjoying a concert, PimEyes was able to analyze groups of people and find particular people from groups of people. So it's not just people uploading, whether it's a business or people posting their own images for finding a roommate, or a college posting the image of grads, but this is also sort of blanket, just taking photos of an activity that's going on. And the person may be incidental to the photo. They may be in the background, maybe only showing half of their face. And PimEyes was able to find them within those photos and say, well, I think this is a match, or, I think this is similar to the photo that you've provided. So I found that fascinating, because I'll mention this more as we go on, but it's now no longer about photos that you as the individual upload, or just strictly business-based photos or other sort of institutions like higher education. But it's also now has the ability to find people in images where you're not the main focus of the image. And I'm concerned with, if we start integrating the Internet of Things sensors, such as webcams or highway cameras, doorbell cameras, etc., where we are recording in the public domain, which is legal, and then services, data aggregation services such as PimEyes, which they don't currently do this, but if they were integrating those data sources, those cameras, taking video in the public domain into their service, if you would be able to then find information out about someone which they may not want to be public, just by leaving their home, because they're no longer covered under an expectation of privacy because they've sort of left the home, and there's, they're out in public, or they're shopping, or they're driving, and what have you. So then I tried this technology also on my friends and could find a limited amount. So the tool's not perfect. It definitely depends on how well your face is in the image, and if it's a quarter of your face and so forth, but was able to find them as well. And then there was another example where, say you're not online, you don't really have much out there. I searched a friend who's sort of in that situation, or perhaps your images are just on social media sites. With PimEyes, like I said, it doesn't include social media. So it wasn't able to find this particular person, but it will return similar looking faces. And my friend and I actually had a laugh, because we just saw, like, wow, how similar do I look to these people? And it was very close. And it was very interesting to see when there are no matches, you get to see people who look similar to you. Maybe they have a slightly different hair color or hairstyle, or their face has maybe they got a few more moles or something, or maybe they're a little lighter skinned or whatever. I want to talk about some of the positive sides of this emerging technology, and I think PimEyes highlights this in some good ways, and I'd like to talk about that more. So the first is you can basically copyright strike them. Digital Millennium Copyright Act. You upload the material to PimEyes, and it will return websites which have either your face or maybe that exact image that you're looking for. And then you'll be able to see, okay, this website is using my content. They shouldn't be doing that. And then you can send them a DMCA claim. And you can say, basically, take this down or we'll enter into legal action. There's some caveats here. So you must be the copyright owner. And then the material can't be covered by fair use or free speech. So there's a few exceptions here. This is sort of the legal side. I'm not a lawyer by any means, but I'm competent enough to be dangerous and probably not totally know what I'm talking about, especially as we go on with some of these bills, which are very, very legalese. So with this, you would be able to use PimEyes and basically find where your copyrighted material is being used. And you would be able to basically send a request to say, hey, take this down. And so some of these explicit art and photo providers like OnlyFans could use PimEyes to send out these claims. And then I have already mentioned the revenge porn example. And PimEyes provides some stats. I believe this was 2022, where they had 7,000 active cases. 2,000 of them were successful. 230, they failed their claim. And then around 5,000 are still ongoing. They also offer services where they'll send a notification if they find a face which is similar to your facial print. And then you can review and determine whether or not it's you. And there are recent trends which suggest that revenge porn is on the rise. So in this example, I could see a few application cases where you want to see what's out there on the internet about you, and you provide your face and you allow them to send you alerts if they find anything. So here are my concerns, especially on the consumer side level, where you're enabling anyone to upload photos of someone and find out what's being returned. So with the PimEyes example, it's difficult to opt out to say, hey, I don't want my images to be included in your service. So I don't want to be returned by your algorithm if someone provides my face or a similar looking face. And to do that with PimEyes, you have to provide a specific photo. It'll search for that photo, but it does a pixel level comparison. So almost like what I was saying about the Google image reverse search, where it's not looking for facial features which are similar to yours. It's sort of looking at the pixel level. It's doing a hash on the pixel level. And it's going to look for that photo, and then if it finds it, it'll put it on a blacklist, and it'll remove that URL from its index so that it can't be returned in the search results. So what you may find surprising is that it doesn't apply the facial feature comparison to remove face level images that look similar or are high ranking of what your face looks like. So in this case, to actually remove yourself from their service, you would likely have to upload your image to PimEyes, find the actual images that are you from the results, and then submit each and every one of those images to be removed from their index. It's a tedious thing to do here. And there's technical reasons that PimEyes wouldn't do the sort of just removing all the faces which look similar to yours, because not all of them will be you. So they don't want to lose that sort of content, those resulting faces which aren't you just because you've uploaded one photo or a couple photos of yourself. And then another concern that I have is, so PimEyes states they only crawl, they only have an algorithm which goes on websites which are open to the public, which don't require logins, which aren't social media, etc. Now the problem with this is that if PimEyes crawls and scrapes other websites which are open, which can be accessed without an account, etc., and they scrape those websites which have those third-party websites, those open third-party websites have scraped private websites which PimEyes can't directly access, then PimEyes indirectly has access to material that is outside of the scope of what they said that they would scrape. And so one of the great examples here was when I was looking up someone I know, their content was behind a paywall in account registrations of the Suicide Girls. So this was the adult images, explicit images. And there was a website which basically ripped all those images, and they had it just here you go. If you want to see it, it's for free. You don't have to pay the account, the subscription fees of OnlyFans or the Suicide Girls account. And so PimEyes couldn't scrape from these paywalled accounts, but they could scrape this third-party website which had took all those images and were just allowing anyone to see it. So this really shows that even though PimEyes could have a decently set scrape scope, what they'll download and involve into their search results, into their index, it can go beyond that. And so it can get a little iffy and blurry on where the line is of what data is being included in the service itself. So one of my main concerns with this consumer-grade facial recognition software is what's the data that we're allowing into it. And so in U.S. law, we have legislation on what is able to be filmed and what's not able to be filmed. And as a sort of high-level description of that, we sort of distinguish between public areas sort of in plain view and then private areas where there is an expectation of privacy. So in expectation of privacy, there's been some court cases where you can't set up a webcam in your bedroom and then record your interactions with someone in the bedroom because there's an expectation of privacy in that realm. You could likely do it if you told the person and they consented to that being done, but that's sort of, there's an expectation of privacy, so you can't record in those areas. Now, when you're in public areas, you're outside your house, say, you're in your car, you're going to appointments, you're going to school, you're grocery shopping, you're recorded probably on a variety of different cameras, whether it's CCTV, whether it's highway cameras, whether it's door ring bell cameras. Your image is being captured, and that's usually considered fair game because you're in public. You have no expectation of privacy. And so my concern is if these data sources are going to be integrated into these data aggregation services where I can provide an image of someone and then, oh, here they are, they're driving their car. And then now you may have incidental information about that person. You may have their car, maybe their license plate, maybe their habits, where are they driving, what's the road that they're using. And so I'm concerned with how much data is put into these systems. Right now, I'm not talking about PimEyes, but I'm talking about future systems. And even with PimEyes, if, say, there was a website which scraped license plate scanners or highway cameras, and PimEyes had access to that, and then they crawled that, and then they applied their facial hash to that to find faces and to index faces, then that would be a real issue of now you're able to potentially find out really identifiable information about someone because that data was included. So I'm wondering where the line is, because this is right now, all of what I said is legal. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've done the best that I can to find this information, and to the best of my knowledge, all the video cameras in the public domain would be legal and accessible to be used. Clearly, the current highway cameras, they're not at this resolution, they're not at this angle, so this is just sort of trying to provide a view into it. And here's actually the PimEyes software, and you can see his face. I've cropped his face from this photo and used it as input, and here's the results that it returns. So it knows this is, this actor. But it doesn't always work, right? And so maybe this would be more appropriate of a camera on the highway, and even this is probably too high resolution and into the vehicle. But PimEyes could not find who these people were. So that's what we currently have and what's currently possible. I want to talk about the future a little bit. And I think this is partially why I'm concerned, is because although what we have right now is terrifying in its own way, as it can aggregate a bunch of information and provide it in a concise way so that you could use these tools for a variety of reasons, but it could be done in sort of nefarious purpose. It could be stalkerware. But now I'm looking at the future, because our tech never really stops. And although what I've just explored is terrifying, the potential future of our tech is beyond terrifying. With this new emerging technology, we can go even further to define basically what some people call the semantic web, but we can have a query language where you can define events in time and space. So temporal events, spatial events, and object relationships within media. So this could be images, where you can say, give me all of the images from the traffic camera where the car driven by Mark Zuckerberg is going above 60 miles per hour, where the speed limit is 50 miles per hour. And you can define all of that within this query language, because it defines temporal, spatial, and object relationships within media. Here, media is, can be images, video, etc. It's difficult to set these systems up right now, and I have a resource here if you're interested. And I don't know if this will ever be at a sort of consumer level where you would be able to search for events like this, where they're very broad. But this is the future of it. And so we're collecting all of this data on ourselves. And right now, it's very difficult to go through this data in a sort of systematic way. But we are trying to create new technologies like this hyperknowledge query language, which will allow us to search through massive amounts of data to find sort of events and things that happened. And you can define that in a temporal and spatial way so that you can query very specific things, and you'll be able to get returned results from that. But you would be able to sift through that in a programmatic way where you don't need a human being to, clock in and try to go through hour by hour trying to find certain things or certain people. You would literally be able to just define it within this query language, and you would be able to find those things. So in the US, we sort of have a few guiding legislation and laws that interface with technology. And so there are laws with the use of biomedical data, what you can do as far as genetic testings for jobs, and not being able to discriminate against people based on their genetic information. There's also rules in recording video in what I was saying of in plain view versus the expectation of privacy, and then what you can do with that video, especially if there is an expectation of privacy. You're restricted on, recording and what you can do with it. Whereas if it is in plain view, the restrictions are much, much less, if at all. And then there are laws with one-party state with audio recording versus a two-party state or all-party state. So where you can record audio. If you're in a one-party state, just one person in the conversation has to know that they are recording. So if you're in a conversation and you know, hey, I want to record this, and you're in a one-party state, you can record it and you don't have to tell the other person. Versus if it's a two-party state, all parties to the conversation or to whatever's going on would have to know that they're being recorded. And then there are also laws on stalking and harassment and doxing. So here's one of the biomedical information legislation. So this is the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act, BIPA. And so PimEyes, the example of the consumer level facial recognition that I was mentioning, actually can't operate in Illinois because of this BIPA, because it covers retina or iris scans, fingerprint, voice print, or scan of hand or face geometry. This would fall within the geometry of your face. So PimEyes cannot be used in Illinois. I just have a little cutout here saying that, hey, we can't use PimEyes in Illinois, and they try to restrict the data that they're scraping to avoid Illinois to the best of their ability. And the legislation on BIPA had a really interesting point of saying that if your sort of biometric data is hacked into, and if that's the only basis for people's sort of logins for, say, a bank transaction, they really can't recover that information, because that is what links you to that service, is your face, how your face looks. So if that's hacked and then it's used to make banking transactions, you're kind of screwed. There's not much you can do at that point. Means of recovering from that is probably not using those services. So with doxing and stalking potential, with PimEyes, with a few of the examples I showed, you could just put someone's face from OnlyFans or adult films or whatever through this system, and then you would be able to find URLs of similar faces, and from that you would likely be able to go into the URLs and find personal information about that person. And this is also where, if we extend the scrape scope of what data sources are allowed in these services, I was mentioning the highway cameras or the Ring doorbell cameras. If those are allowed in the system, even you just leaving the house, you may be captured inadvertently on those video cameras. And if those are used as a part of the system where they're applying this, facial recognition on those videos, you would likely be returned in those photos, and then maybe someone knows, oh, I've seen that street road, or I know where this is. There's other ways of getting identifiable information from that. So I sort of create this data feature spectrum, and I'm asking what we should include in some of these data aggregation services and what we should say is off limits. So we saw that there are already laws on the use of biometrics data. I brought up the BIPA in Illinois, and there are other federal laws that don't allow discrimination and other such restrictions on the use of biometric data. And so I'm basically asking here, if you look at, probably most people really wouldn't care if, the sort of a temperature gauge in a national forest is being used. Maybe they would care if their publicly accessible data is being used, but you've sort of published that online. You don't really have that much say over how that's used. And then, so as we go down this, though, people would likely start caring more and more of how this information is being used, whether it's to sell them ads or to, discriminate against them, especially that one, or if it was used to see if they were a good candidate for the job, and so forth. So here's just two examples. So on this spectrum, I just talk about, yellow highlight is they're probably using this data. I'm not sure. It would depend on the application. And then the blue highlight is it's what it's actually reported in the PimEyes of what they're using. So they're saying here, PimEyes uses publicly accessible data. This is sort of the self-published media and anything that doesn't require a login, even though I think Reddit does, but I'm not sure. And then they also include the biometric data of the face. Whereas then target marketing, it uses, sort of the demographic information. Perhaps it uses purchasing history and then other stuff that's posted, right? So this is sort of the Google's ads that they sell. There's sort of data brokers which know information about you. And they sort of put you into categories, and they use those categories to determine what would be relevant ads to you. But those data brokers, oftentimes sell that information to other businesses and corporations as well. So like I said, my question is, what kind of data should data aggregation services, this is, this PimEyes and search engines and future technologies that are going to take the massive amount of information that's on the internet and provide summaries of them to people for whatever reason. So I'm saying what data should be included in these services and under what constraints and settings and for what purpose. What's the scope and limit that we're applying? And I sort of made up a little purpose scale, data aggregation purpose scales. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about this too much, but there are probably applications in which we would want really highly sensitive information to be used, especially if it advanced sort of the medical research. It is helpful if you have a bunch of people with a certain medical condition and you have their medical histories, and that data will be able to use that now and in the future to perhaps find better treatment plans or to find preventative cures or preventative maintenance stuff that we wouldn't be able to do unless we had this trove of information and data. And so there are probably valid reasons that we would want to use your genetic code or genetic information, even though it is highly sensitive. And, you would want to give that out for hard science and medical research to sort of see if there are advancements that we can make. But if you were told, well, we're going to use your genetic code to, try to sell you this advertisement because we found that this particular genetic code is prone to buying whatever, this or that, you'd probably not want that to happen, right? If it was just purely for sort of profit gain and just sort of more custom tailored ads, you'd probably be less willing to allow that source of data to be used in that manner. So this is sort of my primitive scale that I've made here, where I'm just saying that there are probably different applications at which certain sensitive data like biometric data or geolocation would likely need to be used or would greatly help if it was used. And there, again, this is my initial thoughts on it. I'm not sold on any of this really, but I hope this opens up a sort of discussion on the topic rather than, this is what it is. So from there, I have a few talking points in just sort of general discussion and arguments of what people may be thinking at this point. So I think a traditional response would be, I'm a private person. There aren't photos of me online. And I think through my use of PimEyes, one of the really startling results was that even if you're incidental in the photo, even if you're in the background, and it's really, the photo is not really about you per se, but it's just you were at a wedding or a concert or something like that, you're going to show up. And if it's a wedding photo, you can, whose wedding is it? Oh, yeah. Oh, it's Bobby Jean. Okay, Bobby Jean, you can go on Facebook and see, oh yeah, you're friends with Bobby Jane. Now you have an in. Now you know who this person is, all from a single image. You may have not known who the person was in the image, and from just providing that image and you being within a wedding photo, you now have a start to, basically stalk the person from a single image. And some people would say, watch what you put online. And this is fair game to some extent. Whatever you put online, that's, who knows what anyone's doing with it. I have no clue what will be done with this video. I would say, what about the incidental data from, say, cameras in plain view? And if that's put online, then it's not just what you as the individual are putting online, but it's just you living and basically leaking information about yourself that you can't avoid, because you have to go shopping, you have to go to school, you have to go to work, and we have increasingly more and more cameras and other Internet of Things devices which could be used in these systems, even though they're not currently being used. But if there's a big enough market on sort of consumer data, and there's a big enough push for that as a service, I can imagine it's within the law that they could use that data. They could use video in public view. One argument would be, well, can't you look up people with Google? And you can to some extent, but it's a different level. With Google, you at least need to know some information about the person. Maybe it's a name, maybe it's a name plus where they work or something that would identify them, but it's text. It's not just a blanket, here's a photo of someone that I have no idea about or know little about. With the photo, it'll find similar looking photos. PimEyes in this example would be aggregating a bunch of different websites and then those photos that it found on those web pages, and it's going to return what it considers similar faces to your input photo. And so it's just a different level of tool. And so Google, yes, you can look people up, you can search for information. And I wonder what this kind of world brings when you can simply search someone's face and figure out information about them, about their lives or their habits or activities, their likes and dislikes. What kind of world does that bring about? Are we empowered by this sort of tool? Or are we just easily silenced or blackmailed by our worst moments or idiosyncrasies? Or do we get to choose who we interact with? Are we more well-informed about our associates? I don't think there's a simple answer to this. But what I can say is that we can't escape the direction that we're heading in with our technological innovation. We have more and more sensors, more and more cameras out there. Our microwaves, our refrigerators, all of these things are now coming included with microprocessors. It's here. These devices are collecting data. You have a watch on that collects your steps, it collects your heart rate. You have the phone, which collects your movement, what your search history is, etc. It's here. It's not going to go away. And the question really is, how financially motivated are companies to aggregate this sort of information and provide it as a service? With the coming generations, technology is such an integral part. Maybe for some of us who didn't have phones until, say, high school, and social media was such a new thing, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Maybe you're 14 or 13, or maybe even later, depending on when you're born, before you even interfaced with technology. You're sort of developed enough, or at least, not enough totally, but you're developed to know probably things you shouldn't post, or putting out photos of you where you live, or sort of sensitive information. But now people are getting involved with technology at a younger and younger age, where they probably don't understand the ramifications of what we can now do with technology and what should be put out into the internet and what shouldn't be. And, we can say, yeah, that's the parents' role, and I agree with you. But a lot of people don't realize what's even possible now because it's so new. I mean, this is emerging technology. And I think people would be mortified to find out that with your face, I can find whatever information is out there online about you. Not all the time. It depends on how much is out there, but my reasoning for giving the examples of college graduation photos being included, music concert photos being included, meet our team business pages with photos of the people being included. More and more content is using your face. School books, if that's digitalized and then accessible to these data aggregators, that could be included. So it'll become more and more difficult to escape the preview of these tools, of this software. And I'm not sure how much we will be able to be private individuals. I really don't know. And I think with the up and coming generations, we put so much of our information out there, and we don't realize that once it's out there, it can be used for whatever reason, for good or for bad. This is Alien Commentary, and if you enjoyed this content and the topic of technology and its implications in the present and in the future, please check out my locals page, Alien Commentator.